everyone, it's Silvia. Welcome back to my channel. So ever since I started my YouTube channel just over 2 years ago, I laid out a set of rules for myself, and I really want to check whether I caved and I did not respect those rules. They were self-imposed. They had nothing to do with the general guidelines of YouTube and not even TarotTube, but I remember thinking to myself that they were very important. And it was going to be part of who I am, or the reason why I'm here. So I started this channel because I really wanted to connect with other people in the tarot community, and I wanted to be part of a family. I wanted to create meaningful connections. And after, as I said, just over 2 years, I am happy to say that I feel wonderful. It's a wonderful community that I'm a part of, especially now also with my members. We are very close, and we're doing all sorts of things, all sorts of videos and all sorts of activities. And I am happy to say that I've actually found some friends thanks to that. So this is a wonderful, the really positive part of being on YouTube or even on TarotTube. But the most important rule that I actually laid out for myself just over 2 years ago was that I didn't want YouTube to change my taste in tarot. Namely, I didn't want to find myself having to buy a deck and ultimately buying a deck just because I had a channel. I wasn't going to let the fact that I was making videos about tarot decks change my taste. After 2.5 years, 2 years and 3 months, I have to say I don't know whether that is still true or not. And I've been wanting to make this video for a couple of months now because I really want to double check. But I didn't know why. I didn't know the intent behind this video. I didn't know how to do it because I do have more than 500 decks, and I was buying a lot of decks even before I started filming videos. And so I was watching a video from a booktuber that I really like, and he did this video. He said these are the 10 best books that I bought ever since I started the channel. And so I thought to myself, why don't I do just that? And then for each and every one of these top 10 decks that I bought ever since I started my channel, I asked myself, in all honesty, would I have bought this deck had I not had a YouTube channel? Or did I just buy it because I have a channel? It's going to be a journey, and I'm happy to be filming it and happy to be sharing it with you. Because I may need a shoulder to cry on at the end of the video, or maybe not. I honestly don't know. I prepared all the decks that are next to me right now, but I have not asked myself the fatal question. So we're going to check that out together. Just a small clarification actually too. One of them, I am not going to show you decks that I bought before I started my YouTube channel, because obviously they're not part of the scope of this video. And also because I'm only going to show you 10 decks, but I love many more than 10 decks out of my entire collection, there's going to be some decks that are going to be left out. Maybe I'll do another video, but let's start with 10, and it's a really good number, I believe. Okay, let's start with one deck that I bought because we have been actually studying it with my members. So with my members, I do a deck study, we vote on them, and we started since I started my membership, so just over a year ago. And I believe that we've had some great discussions on all of the decks. Some of the decks were a positive surprise, some of them were less of a positive surprise. But it's always about having fun, and it's also always about understanding the intention of the creator behind the deck. So one of them that I bought, thanks to the fact that we have been studying decks with my members, is the Wildwood Tarot by Mark Ryan and John Matthews, illustrated by Will Worthington. I did not have this deck. And that comes the question, right? So would I have bought this deck if it wasn't for my channel? No, I don't think I would have, because it's not one of the decks that I did not know existed. Of course I did. I had seen these decks many times before. By the way, I have put mine in this really beautiful bag by the Tarot Bag Ladies, which is absolutely fantastic because it's got it really has the same vibes of the deck, so I highly recommend it. So I knew about this deck, I had seen it plenty of times. I think I didn't want to buy because I found it a bit intimidating, in the sense that I knew that it was related to, let's say, a system that was slightly different. It would have been a deck that I needed to study in order to be able to read with it. And it was true. We actually studied this deck. We definitely needed to study that in order to be able to read with it. Do I regret buying it? Absolutely not. This is a deck that I absolutely love, thanks to my members, because honestly, whilst we were doing the studying of this deck, we were doing the live discussion, there were a number of things that actually were brought to my attention that I didn't even see, and so that actually made it a fantastic experience. It is true that this can be a bit of an intimidating deck, because especially if you're new to tarot, knowing that a deck follows a system that is slightly different, let's say for the usual LWS that we might be familiar with, can feel like a bit of a daunting task. But I have to say, first and foremost, the artwork and the color palette on these cards is just absolutely amazing. I really, really love all of these cards. It does have a very pagan, Celtic vibe and energy to it. All of the cards do. It is very interesting the way in which, for example, even the chord cards are very specific. There's a lot of thought that goes behind the production of this deck. And on the one hand, there's other decks that probably cover this area in my collection. I remember thinking before buying this deck that the Druidcraft Tarot, which I actually did buy before my channel, I thought that was going to be probably very similar, and I didn't want to have a duplicate or a deck that was covering the same type of area. But it was because I was studying it with my members that I finally understood that this deck is a very, very unique deck, and it gives you a very unique perspective on tarot. And at the same time, because it is one of those decks that has a very strong intention behind the creation of it, it really gives you the possibility to bond in an even deeper way to this world, the world we live in. It is one of those tarot decks that is very earthy, and as such, not just because of the alchemical energy associated with the element of earth, but because it really invites us in to understand the importance of this planet, and as a consequence of that, understand also our role and how important our role is in this planet. And so I really love certain types of associations. Some of them were difficult to understand, the presence of an egg in the Star card, but then you dig deeper into this deck and you understand, as I said, the intention behind it. Many cards, especially when it comes to the Suit of Swords, I honestly felt that they were lacking. They were probably not the best cards in the deck, let's put it this way. That was absolutely not a deal breaker. There is a really fantastic way to approach this deck, and we've done a guided meditation. I proposed a guided meditation to my members when we were studying the major arcanas, because the major arcanas themselves are laid out in a different way. So I'm not going to go too much deeper into details of this, and if you want to join my membership, I always say this deck was the study deck from a couple of months ago, but you will always be able to have access to all of the videos, including the live discussion. So what I explained in the material that I make available to my members is, let's say, the approach of the authors to this system, which is based on the Wheel of Dia and all of the seasons related to that. So it's a very interesting approach, and I am very grateful that thanks to my members voting to study this deck, I had to buy it, because now it's a very beautiful deck that I have in my collection, and it's also very safe. Coincidentally, another deck that I already had in my collection is the Lightseers Tarot, but this is a deck that shouldn't be in this video. The only reason why I wanted to mention is as a honorable mention is that thanks to also the fact that this is another deck that we're currently studying and we're having the live discussion on the 26th, is that because I have this YouTube channel, I finally bought the Tarot for Lightseers, which is the book that only just recently, I believe probably 4, 5, 6 months ago, came out by Chrisanne Donnelly. And I absolutely love the way in which this book has changed my perspective on the Lightseers Tarot. This is a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. We've been studying this book together with the deck with my members, and it's been absolutely an amazing adventure. I love everything about this deck. We've been going through all of the spreads. I've also created some custom spreads. We've been doing all of the suits, and let me tell you, the number of symbols that are in the Lightseers Tarot that I had no idea, simply because I probably had a different approach to the deck before I had to study it. I simply did not know that Chrisanne was writing something about runes and the mandalas and the chakras and color theory as well, and all of these kind of things that are incredibly interesting once you get to know them. And so would I have bought this book if I hadn't had to study this deck for my members? I would not have bought it, but I'm incredibly happy that I did, because now the way in which I read the Lightseers Tarot has been revitalized in a massive way. Really, really interesting. I highly recommend it. As I said, it is very affordable. At least in Australia it's about $22. So I obviously don't know how much it sells for in the US, but it is an incredible book and I highly recommend it. So that was an honorable mention that I felt like talking about, because it is something that definitely changed my taste as well. I wouldn't have bought that book if it wasn't for my channel membership. So one of the things that changed thanks to my YouTube channel was the way in which I back Kickstarter campaigns. Backing Kickstarter campaigns for decks was nothing new for me. What is new is the intention behind me backing a campaign. I realized that I've become a lot more picky. But that can also be due to a number of circumstances in my life, or also the fact that I do have a quite large collection. So nowadays, before I click, back the campaign, I ask myself if I have a special place, if I think that I will have a special place for this deck in specific. One deck in specific that I really want to talk about is this one. This is the Tarokijali. It means yellow tarot, but it's referred to a specific genre in Italy, which is referring to books from mystery books from, I believe, the 1930s. I could be wrong, up to the 1950s. And there were mystery books, and they were easily recognizable because the cover was always yellow. So that became an aphorism. It became something that we tell each other. So what are you reading right now? I'm reading a giallo. So I'm reading a mystery book. I'm reading a thriller. So that became, especially in the 70s and 80s and the beginning of the 90s, it also became a genre that could be recognized as a movie genre. And in specific, we have two fantastic movie directors. One is Mario Bava and the other one is Dario Argento, that were very active in those years. Dario Argento in specific is very well known also in the English-speaking world because some of his movies were translated. And one of them was Suspiria. I believe it was quite famous back in those years, and also Phenomena. Phenomena, honestly, it became a cult in Italy. The protagonist was Jennifer Connelly, and she went to this, it was a college, and she was staying there. She was an American girl. She went to this college. She was very young when she filmed this movie. And I remember thinking that I wanted to be her. I wanted to dress like her. She had a pajama, and her pajama was from Armani, but it was one of the, let's say, lesser expensive items from Armani. And I remember that I was saving money to buy that pajama. It was black with the Armani eagle on the back in gold. It was very 80s, very kitsch, very 80s, but I just absolutely loved it. And I remember really absolutely adoring that movie, and that became one of the first movies that I was watching just because I became enamored with that genre. And when I saw that there was this Kickstarter campaign from the chain assembly.com that was producing this deck based on let's say inspired by the movie posters of those movies. So we don't actually see movie posters that were real actual movies, but these cards have been inspired by those movie posters. And I mean, look at this. This is the back of the box. Isn't it just absolutely gorgeous? I really love this skeleton in this really toxic kind of yellow green. So this is a deck that honestly, it is also on the very large size. As you can see, it's almost as big as my hands. So it's not one of those decks that I would probably use for reading, because it also is a very gloomy kind of deck. It's a very dark kind of deck. And rightly so, because obviously it is based on those movies, and those movies were very dark. Very gruesome. There were a number of tropes that were always present in these movies, and I believe when studying cinema and critic of cinema, you know, you had to learn how to distinguish these movies in specific. It was kind of one of those things that made you, you know, call a Western a spaghetti Western rather than another type of Western. And it wasn't just because one of the directors of spaghetti Western was Sergio Leone, but it was because it had a certain number of elements that were present in the movie that made you identify it as such. And so this could be said as well for the movies that inspired these cards, so the posters of which inspired these cards. Very, very dark. I mean, some of these cards are probably also kind of triggering, and I understand, of course, that this is not everyone's cup of tea. Of course, there was also a way to look at the female body in a way that it's nowadays is incredibly offensive, and so obviously we're talking about something that is very dated. You know, back then it was part of these movies. It was part of a certain appeal of the movies themselves. I was too young to go to the movie theater when they were released. I mean, I wasn't even born in the 60s, and in the 70s I certainly could not have gone to the movies to watch these movies, because I believe that there were you know, you needed to be at least 18 to watch them. But when I started having the possibility to watch these in the late 80s and early 90s, I actually really fell in love with this genre. It is very dark, as I said, very gloomy, but very fascinating at the same time. And this is Venice, so of course I absolutely love this card. It's the Tower, which is, you know, not the best card in the deck, but I really love the depiction of the Campanile and the Leone di San Mark's lion. So there's a number of things that obviously really resonate for me out in these cards. And if you're Italian, if you were passionate about horror movies by Dario Argento in those years, you will probably love this deck. Now, this is a deck that I bought thanks to the fact that I knew about it by watching other tarot tubers videos. Would I have bought this deck if it wasn't for my YouTube channel? Yes, I definitely would have bought it, because this is right down my alley. It's my taste. I love these kind of darker decks. I have many of them. I used to buy them even before I started a YouTube channel, so that is a definite yes. Something else that I wanted to say about being a part of the Tarot Tube community is that sometimes I see people talking about a deck so much in such wonderful positive terms that I cave into FOMO, so the fear of missing out on something absolutely fantastic, because we know that sometimes a deck goes out of print, and then I know that I will kick myself for not getting it when I could. And this is a FOMO deck for me. So this is the Circle of Doors Tarot. This is a deck that it took me a while to get, because I didn't think that I wanted it. I saw it on, as I said, many channels, a lot of people talking about this deck, a lot lot of people talking and explaining the concept of this deck. So if you look at this tent, for example, this is an installation, an artistic installation that was presented during Burning Man back in, I believe it was 2020, but I'm not entirely certain, but it was a few years ago. And this, I don't know if you can tell, but this is basically a tent with a number of doors, or circle of doors, because they're obviously positioned in a circle. And you could choose which door to enter this tent through. And depending on your choice, you would have had a different experience. So this is the concept behind the creation, or the artistic creation of the deck. And when it comes to the media used in the production of this deck, we're talking about photography. And not just photography, there's a number of photographic decks. I do have a few of them, but also a very specific technique, which is actually called sandwich. And I used to work in photography. I used to do the sandwich technique when I still had my own darkroom, developing room. It is not really done anymore, in the sense that obviously we're talking about, this is analog photography, and now we're talking about digital photography, and the sandwich technique, which is basically stacking different negatives and then printing them in the same photo. You can achieve that very easily with an app, or even out of your phone with a double exposure. So it's not that difficult, but imagine back then it was actually very difficult, and it was actually something that was considered kind of edgy, in the sense that not everyone was doing it, and you really needed some kind of a motivation to do it, because it was not something that was requested. If you were working in photography, you know, people didn't come to you asking for a double exposure or something obtained this way. But the artistic results were actually kind of edgy, as I said, and very interesting. So when I saw this deck, I was really asking myself whether I wanted a deck that had and that reminded me of this kind of technique. Because I was a photographer during the time in which this was an analog production, I really asked myself if, you know, when I was a photographer, I was refusing to do this unless it was for myself, because I knew that it was not requested. It could have been a popular technique, but it would not have been a popular result, because people were not coming to you to commission you this kind of work. And so I really asked myself, am I going to be okay with this? Is it going to resonate with me? It really takes a lot of intention behind the creation of these images, in order for them to mean something to me. And so that was one of the reasons why I wasn't, rushing to click the buy button on this deck. But then, because I saw so many really beautiful, positive videos, especially Annette from A Project Refined Life, she talked about this deck so many times, and she was also pairing it with a number of other decks, and I really loved their pairings. And so basically I was convinced. So this is a fear of missing out deck, because I was also really scared that being an indie deck, it would have gone out of print, and then when it was going out of print, I would have wanted it, and I would have kicked myself for not getting it when I could have. And so I ended up buying it. Would I have bought it if I hadn't had a channel? Probably not, because as I said, this type of technique in photography, to me, it really needs a strong motivation to exist. And not just that, but there's 78 cards, so obviously there are 78 of these photographs that have been obtained through that technique. But at the end of the day, I am happy that I have it, because I've actually found out by working with this deck that it is a very powerful deck. It's very deep. And so what I was lacking in motivation for me to buy this deck, because I couldn't really resonate with the intention behind the images, I finally understood when I started working with this deck, which obviously would not have been possible if I hadn't bought it. So I am quite happy that I have it in my collection now. Another FOMO deck that was definitely not in my radar, and I literally just bought it because everyone was talking about this deck on their YouTube channel or even on Instagram, is the Cozy Witch Tarot deck by Amanda Lovelace. The artwork is by Janina Medeiros. I have to say that I had so many doubts before buying this deck, but I kept on seeing it. It kept on calling to me. There were a number of channels presenting this deck, doing readings, especially with this deck, because ultimately that's the reason why I ended up caving and buying it. I watched so many people giving out readings with these cards, and they were spot on. They were fantastic. They were giving out incredibly insightful readings. And that was really what convinced me. And so I finally got it out of FOMO, because not that I was actually scared that this deck would have been out of print, because it is a mass market deck and it is quite available, readily available, let's say. But I was worried that, you know, maybe it would have gone up in price. There's another deck that I bought, the Everyday Enchantment Tarot by Poppy Paling. I always wanted to buy that deck, for example. I always knew that one day I would have bought that deck, and it wasn't because of YouTube that I finally bought it, but it was out of FOMO anyway, because unfortunately what happened to Poppy, unfortunately after what happened to Poppy, the printer jacked up the prices, and when it was usually selling for like $30 Australian, I ended up paying $67, which is more than twice as much. And so I was worried that because this deck had become so popular and it was on everyone's channels, on everyone's Instagram account and TikTok, it would have gone up in price. And then all of a sudden, I believe that it was Amazon Prime Day, or maybe it was Black Friday sale or something like that. And this deck was selling for 17 Australian dollars, which is very cheap. And so I finally convinced myself to get it. And so this is a deck that I would not have bought, for sure not, absolutely not. This is not my aesthetics. The protagonists in these cards, they look like they could be my kids. I could be their mother, and there's absolutely no resonance for me when it comes to the age. For example, body shape is well represented, so I'm not saying anything about that. But, you know, age-wise, it's definitely not a deck that resonates with me. But at the end of the day, I do recognize an excellent deck when I see one. And so I just have to put aside the fact that I don't see myself in the protagonist in the cards, because that is not necessary for me. And that's something that I find out when I finally got it and when I finally started using it. And let me tell you, I don't know whether it's because of the images or a combination, most likely, between the images and the sentences or the messages at the bottom of the cards, but this is a fantastic deck. When you're reading with this deck, it just really gives you a great reading. It's fantastic for divination, it's fantastic for personal growth, it's fantastic also for relationship, you know, also for career related readings. I cannot speak highly enough about this deck. And yes, it is one of those decks. Would I prefer that to be more age represented characters, representing characters? For sure. But at the end of the day, I don't need that. I can still read with it, and I really have a fantastic experience reading with this. So having a YouTube channel, a TarotTube channel, really means that I watch a lot more videos than I used to. Because of that, as I was saying, some of the decks that I bought were determined by FOMO, because I was looking at these decks being presented and I felt like even though they were not in my wish list, I needed to buy them. Another one that, let's say, falls under this category is definitely the Tarot of Vampires by Ian Daniels. This is a deck that used to be published by Llewellyn and unfortunately went out of print. They didn't renew the contract with Ian Daniels to continue the printing of this deck, and so now it has become hard to find already, even though I believe it went out of print probably 8-10 months ago. It was still in stock in some places, but then it became more and more difficult to find. And nowadays I've seen it sold for like $250 on a Facebook group. Now I have to say that this one, yes, it was another FOMO deck that I would not have bought if it wasn't for my YouTube channel. And the reason why I'm really happy that I have this deck, that I finally caved and bought it, is mostly because of the Phantasmagoria, which is the guidebook, or rather the companion book that comes with the deck. This is a fantastic book. This is really giving you a an edge when you're studying tarot. It talks about so many things, and it doesn't fall into the category of books that tell you probably too many things and then you end up forgetting them or not really familiarizing yourself with these systems that are presented here, because perhaps it doesn't dig deeper enough, or it doesn't really explain things in such a way that you will remember them. This one is quite the opposite. It's a fantastic book. It's written in an excellent way, and also when it comes to a study book, let's put it this way, it's just amazing. It really makes you feel like you're understanding things in a better way rather than just studying them. It's not academic. It is written in a very friendly language, and I cannot praise this book enough. And yes, of course, it is a companion book to the deck itself, so obviously it's also referring to the deck, but I would say this book is a standalone for learning a couple of things related to tarot, from astrology, alchemy, numerology, Kabbalah. This is really amazing. The deck itself is not one of those decks that is, let's say, would have been in my wish list because of the art style. It's just not, it is dark because obviously it's about vampires. And I love darker themes, I love horror themes, and I love vampire-related decks as well. But to me, the Tarot V by Alejandro Colucci, that is my vampire style. That's the one that I really love when it comes to just the art style. Having said that though, I would say I would probably have bought this deck anyway, even if I didn't have a YouTube channel, because it is one of those decks that I really recognized the amount of information that was bringing into the table, and that was, you know, giving me the possibility to enrich my knowledge in reading tarot. I don't use it. I don't use this deck. I don't particularly think that this is a really great reader. This is just because the images don't resonate with me, and it's very personal, and I know that other people will probably gasp and clutch your own pearls, and it's absolutely fine, and I apologize. It's just that as a tarot reader, I really have to feel comfortable when using a deck, and if the images of a deck in specific do not resonate with me, you know, I have a responsibility towards the person that I'm reading for. And so if I have to look at Prince of Grails and think to myself, this is the Prince of Grails, so obviously we're looking at core cards, and we're looking at the Grails, which is a suit of cups, so there is this sense of empathy, there is this sense of also, you know, starting your journey, understanding your own feelings, and thriving to conquering them, but also on the nurturing side. And I look at the image, and this doesn't really, that's not what this image is saying to me. This image is telling me something about brooding, possibly, and you know, because there is a little bit of blood coming out of the lips of this character, I'm also thinking about probably absorbing somebody else's energy rather than helping them reach maturity with their emotions. So this is not really speaking to me, but again, as I said, this is not a deal breaker, and as I said, I would have probably bought this deck anyway because of the Phantasmagoria companion book, and I don't want what I'm saying to you be of any concern to anyone. If you read with this deck and you love it and the cards speak to you, by all means. I'm actually kind of jealous because I would love for this deck to speak to me. It's just, it doesn't. I would have bought it anyway because of the book. So I would say I finally bought it thanks to YouTube, because I got to know the extent of knowledge that was presented in the book, and I'm certainly happy that I did, because it is a fantastic guidebook. One thing that I want to acknowledge about the fact that I'm on TarotTube and I watch a lot of videos, and I also, you know, I feel like I am part of this community, and obviously there's a lot of talk about decks in the community itself. That made me also open to buying decks in a different language. So obviously I always bought Italian decks, being Italian. My very first deck was in Italian, there's no two ways around that, but there was availability of a lot of English decks also in Italy, so I had a fair bit of a collection of English decks as well. But that was it. English and Italian has been it for a number of years. I had a few Marseille, obviously, and those would have been in French. But when it comes to a simple RWS, I don't think that I would have reached out for a French deck or a German deck or a Spanish deck or a Russian deck or even Chinese or Japanese, etc. I believe that I opened my mind to decks in different languages thanks to TarotTube, for sure, thanks to TarotTube. So one of them is one of my favorite decks of all times now, and it's the Tarot Pop Culture. So this is a French deck. This has not been translated in English, and I really don't understand why, because it's a fantastic deck and I really love it. So this is by Bérengère de Moncy, and I really want to thank Marine from the Waves of Your Soul. She did not recommend this deck, she didn't buy it, but it is thanks to her that I'm actually considering a lot more French decks in my collection, because she has made a number of videos presenting her French decks, and so that really gave me the possibility to ask myself if I was liking them or not, and I started buying them thanks to her. So this one I bought it when I was in Paris last year, and but I really wanted it, so it was in my radar, and it is just such an amazing deck. This is obviously based on pop culture, as you can imagine, due to the title. And I have to say, there are so many references here, and I love that the guidebook is actually giving you the so this is from Studio Ghibli, for example. So the guidebook is, and this is Death Note, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was actually on Netflix like a couple of years ago, and I really loved it. So okay, I have to finish this sentence, because if I keep on looking at the cards and talk, I will never finish it. There's a number of references to movies, TV shows, and also books in here. And many, I recognize 90% of them, 10% I didn't, but I went to the guidebook, and I'm so very happy that the guidebook actually tells you what they're referring to, because it would have been difficult otherwise. So moving on and looking at the cards, really love them. Captain Hastings, Sleepy Hollow, for example, Harry Potter. Yes, there's a number of Harry Potters in there. There's a number of Keanu Reeves, The Matrix, but also Constantine. Again, Harry Potter with Hermione Granger. The Hollywood Sisters, for example, Lestat de Lioncourt, Sailor Moon, even Sailor Moon, which is really fantastic. Willie, One Eyed Willie from the Goonies. I mean, I grew up loving the Goonies so much, and I was just so stoked when I saw this card. And it's the Nine of Pentacles, and you know, it gives me an additional idea on how to read this card, because it is true. Spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the Goonies and you want to watch it, then skip ahead a couple of minutes, because I'm going to give you a spoiler. So obviously they found this treasure, and they thought that that was all they were hoping to find. They thought that once they found the treasure, they would have solved all their problems. But it's in that moment in which they redeem themselves, particularly the protagonist, because he understands that One Eye Willie would not have wanted them to take their treasure. That was just for him. And it was really incredible. It was an incredible scene, because it was a movie that was, you know, directed to children, obviously. And I think that back then it was difficult. When I watched it the first time, it was difficult for me to understand the morale behind it. But when I matured and I started understanding, you know, the intention behind some of the scenes of the movie, I immediately resonate with that. Because I thought to myself, sometimes we strive so much and we struggle to achieve something, and when we do, with the Nine of Pentacles, it might not necessarily be what we needed all along. And so what we need is to move on to the Ten of Pentacles, which is actually the sharing of that that we have been given. And then we got the DeLorean, we Back to the Future, Gandalf, of course, Lord of the Rings. So there's so many, Daenerys Targaryen, John Preston, the Dragon Slayer. So as you can see, Eric Draven, for example, This is one of the cards that convinced me to buy this deck, even though I didn't really need much convincing, because I love The Crow, the movie, the original one. It was just such an amazing movie. I really loved it so much. And then of course we got the Matrix, which is amazing because, you know, it's the Two of Cups. And you think about this scene in the Matrix and you think, do you want the red pill or the blue pill? So how do we relate that into reading the Two of Cups? Perhaps this other person we are in a relationship with, whatever that relationship is, you know, we need to find the right way to be with this person and face truth or consequences. And it's just an amazing way to present a card. So I really believe that they have done a fantastic job. We got Buffy, we got Constantine, as I was saying earlier. We got Keanu also. When it comes to, there you go, of course it had to be the death card. John Wick, my favorite character, fictional character of all time. Yes, it is because it's, you know, acted by Keanu Reeves, which I adore, but it's also because it is the anti-hero. For me, it is just amazing the way in which it's breaking every single let's say guidelines on how a hero should be presented in an action-packed movie. John Wick, especially in episode 4, I believe it says something like 30 words in total. You know, and it's because it's not about him, it's about the story, it's about redemption. It's just absolutely amazing. Sorry, it blows my mind every time I talk about that movie. So I loved that this deck had Keanu Reeves as John Wick for the death card, because it's the Baba Yaga, and that is absolutely fantastic. So as I said, the Proton Pack, of course, Adversaries on Hand. For each and every one of these cards, there is a discovery, and I just love it. I love reading with this. I think it reads really well. Total Recall as well. I love looking at the cards. I love reading the guidebook because it does, as I said, refer back to the let's say the images that are depicted on the cards. We have Wednesday Addams. It's just amazing. Moonrise Kingdom, and again Neo from the Matrix with Keanu Reeves again with the world, which is absolutely amazing. Love it. Absolutely great. So would I have bought this deck if I hadn't had a YouTube channel? Probably not, because I wouldn't have known that I can actually use tarot decks in a different language. So I am so grateful to this channel for giving me the possibility to know that I can also buy decks in a different language and specific for this deck, because it really makes me happy. Another deck that I bought, thanks to the fact that I have a YouTube channel, is this one here. This is the Divia Moon Tarot, but this is the Paradoxical edition. It is obviously by Patrick Valenza, but this one is still an indie deck, and I believe that it might be out of print now. I don't necessarily know. So the reason why I'm saying that this deck it only came into my collection because I have a YouTube channel was because I was in Ho Chi Minh City in a shop known as LT Tarot, which has now also been praised by the Tokyo Tarot Museum. They formed a partnership only just recently. And it was an amazing experience, and the fact that I was there was because I was actually filming a video. So I was filming a video showing everyone where to find tarot decks in Ho Chi Minh City. And it was really an amazing experience. It was amazing to get in touch with the staff, the personnel at the shop. It was amazing to be there. It is on top of a convenience store, so you could have a drink, and they even offer you some snacks, for example, whilst you were browsing their collection. They have something for everyone because they have a collection that is absolutely incredible. There's something like 300-400 decks, probably even more than that, on display that you can buy. And they have a mix between tarot and oracle decks, and also a mix between indie decks and mass market decks. All of them legit. And obviously because of that, you know, it is an industry that is struggling a little bit because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of counterfeit decks that are in circulation, unfortunately, but they really made it a point to only offer for sale genuine decks, and that is something that is absolutely admirable. hats off to them, to the team at LT Tarot, because it was an amazing experience. So I really love this deck. I was filming this video, I was deciding which decks to get, and when I saw this one, I thought to myself, you know what, I'm gonna get it because I have the other Patrick Balenza Divia Moon deck, but I have the mass market edition, and this one is the paradoxical. And so I was thinking about filming a video about the differences between the two decks, and I got it because of that reason. And then when I started reading with it, it completely blew my mind. I understood that this is a completely different deck. I could make a video between the differences of those two editions, but they're so different that it would be the same as making a video trying and pointing out the difference between two decks that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. So I did not end up filming that video, which is ironic, but I did end up buying this deck because I was filming a video. So I love this deck. It is incredible. The vibes of this deck are completely different. It is ironically a very well balanced deck. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when you look at the cards, because there is this sense of the paradoxical is obtained by inverting the colors, your mind doesn't immediately recognize the images on the cards, but it takes a while, and that kind of distracts you in a good way, because you're free to wander a little bit more in the card itself without making the parallel to the other version of the deck. I hope I'm explaining myself. It's all about recognizing the card and understanding its meaning, or having to properly look at the card and actually bonding with the card itself. I do prefer to do it this way, and that is the reason why I believe this is actually more balanced than the other version, because it's not as recognizably creepy. I hope I'm not saying something offensive. This is the way in which I relate to this deck. So I would not have bought this deck if it wasn't for my YouTube channel. But again, this is a fantastic deck. I am so happy that I got it. It's an excellent reader, and as I said, really, really balanced. The next two decks, I am going to show them together because it's a pairing. And I have to say, even though I used to do pairings even before I started my YouTube channel, I definitely enriched my practice because of filming videos about pairings. And so this is a fantastic pairing. I really loved it. I have a number of really wonderful pairings that really make me happy. But this one in specific is worth mentioning because I would have bought this deck, the Feminine Wisdom Oracle, by Leah Andrich, which is a rock pool deck, but I would not have bought the Tan Ellis Earth Woman Tarot, and there's a very specific reason. But let me just show you both of these. So the reason why I wouldn't have bought the Earth Woman Tarot is because the characters on the cards do not have a face. And that has always been a bit of a deal breaker for me. From a cognitive point of view, I find myself struggling because I always relate to the expression of a face, let's say, of a person. Whenever I read a card, I look into them. The expression for me is extremely important, also to understand the author's take on the card itself. Is the character of the Nine of Cups, do they look smiling or not? Are they happy about the wish come true, or do they feel lonely? Do they understand that the wholeness of the whole suit of cup is intended to progress into the Ten of Cups, or are they happy and content with what they have? So that is something that I always notice, and so obviously not having a face means that I couldn't do that. However, thanks to the fact that I am doing a lot of pairings in my videos, I realized that when I put these two together, the Oracle deck gave me the possibility to expand on the message, also on the characters in the tarot cards. So it is, it's a pairing that to me, it's almost as if it were just one deck, because at the end of the day, I always use them together. And I'm so very grateful of my practice on YouTube, because I do all of these pairings, because that means that opens up a whole new world. It means that I can actually look into decks where the characters don't have a face, because sometimes I can find a way to read them as well. So as you can see, it is amazing. I love all about these two decks together. The color palette is very similar, the art style is very similar. It's not the same author, obviously. So it's not like pairing up two decks by the same creator, but it feels almost as if it were the same author, because it is just amazing how well these two pair up together. And last but not least, this is my top one tarot deck that I've acquired ever since I started my channel. And this is an amazing deck, and I will never stop talking about this deck. And I know that I've talked about it in a few videos, but here it is again. Please bear with me. It is the Unveil Tarot by Jessie Lonergan. You probably thought that I was going to talk about this. This is a deck that is produced by Liminal 11. And it is a, let's say, very affordable deck, or at least I bought it at a very affordable price, although I do realize that sometimes Australia gets some offers that you cannot find in other countries. I don't honestly know how much it cost in other countries, but this wasn't, let's say, one of those decks that I had to think twice about acquiring it because of the price. It was one of those decks that I wasn't entirely sure about, because at the beginning it looks very unassuming. I know that you look at the cards and you think to yourself, okay, this is one of those decks that probably is a bit gimmicky, in the sense that, yeah, okay, it is a modern take on the RWS, the images are very modern. And then you start looking deeper at the cards and you find out that there is this internal inside frame, and inside that inside frame there is a slightly different image. And that is the first step in order to understand this deck. And then when you read the cards and then you look at the meaning that is portrayed through these images, you start understanding even more. And I remember filming the unboxing of this deck and being completely shocked by how good the intention behind this card is. There is so much that you can talk about these. The High Priestess, for example, is depicted as this rock, as she's a singer in a rock concert. But when you look at the inside frame, you also see the way in which the High Priestess would have been depicted in a traditional way. And so there is this sense of parallel that is created between the way in which there is this sort of performance, but at the same time, the sense of wisdom of a character that has their eyes closed. And, the symbology is still there from the traditional RWS, because you see a moon, for example. And so that makes you think. And there's nothing that I appreciate more about a deck than, making me think and making me realize what is actually important, what is actually going on in this card, what is the message that is depicted, and what is the intention of the creator. For the Strength card, for example, we see that there is a very rushed scene. So we imagine we are in a hospital. There is what I believe is a doctor attending to a patient that has possibly been in an accident under door, but there is this sense of rushing, there is this sense of urgency, sense of something that is actually happening right now. But at the same time, you look within the frame and there is this sense of calmness that comes out of it, because there is this bond that is created between this person and the lion that is depicted on the card. And so I just absolutely love spending time with this deck, understanding the meaning of the card, understanding what is inside the frame and what is the relationship of the image inside and the image outside of the frame. Understanding it also being, for example, I'm looking at the King of Swords and that prompted something. So I don't necessarily agree with all of these cards. I understand the way in which they are presented to us, but sometimes I think that I am open to changing my mind. So for me, the King of Swords, for example, it is shown as a dictator, someone that has been pluridecorated. I have my idea on who this person might be, but I could be completely wrong, and there are no actual references in the guidebook that you can double check. So this is just my idea. This could be a dictator, in specific a dictator of an Asian country, let's put it this way. But then I look at what's inside the inside frame and I see that there is a very small heart. So immediately my attention is not necessarily focusing on what this person, this dictator may mean, but what is the intent of the card, showing us that the King of Swords may have that power, but their heart is very small. Is that the way in which I read the King of Swords? I don't know. See, that really makes me doubt it, because I have my own ideas about the Queen of Swords, and I know that many decks show the Queen of Swords with a smaller cup next to her. Yes, she is the Queen of Swords. The Swords is a suitor mind, so obviously it's all about that reaching the maturity in your thoughts. But at the same time, do I see that as reflected in the King of Swords? Probably not. So do I agree or not with this way of representing the King of Swords? I probably do, but it's something that I gained after thinking about it, studying the card, remembering my knowledge of the card, and accepting this way of portraying this particular card. So as you can see, there's a number of things that this one, sorry, but I'm not going to discuss about this card, but it's very clear, very clear. And so I am so very grateful to this deck for the way in which it has enriched my experience by using tarot, looking at the tarot, studying a deck. I really think that this is one of the best tarot decks that I have seen in a long time. And it's not necessarily for aesthetical reasons, because, I mean, aesthetically speaking, yeah, it's a modern kind of art style. It's graphic novel related or adjacent. But the meaning of the cards, the way in which they are presented to us, is just absolutely mind-blowing. This is really mind-blowing for me. And I will never stop talking about this deck because I really love it so much. I even took it with me when I went to the Tarot conference in Western Australia. And, you know, the people sitting around me at the table, they were looking at the deck and were asking me what it was. And I was showing them the cards and talking about them. And, you know, it is one of those decks that really triggers a reaction within yourself, because you are challenged constantly by these images. And there's, as I said, there's nothing that I like more. So would I have bought this deck if it wasn't for my YouTube channel? I don't know. I really don't want to say either yes or no, because I don't want to ask myself how much of my taste has changed in the last 2 years thanks to the fact that I have a channel. I don't want to think that I would not have bought it if I didn't have a YouTube channel, because I would have missed out on so much. But I am grateful for this channel. I am grateful to you, the tarot community, and my subscribers, and above all, I am so very grateful to my members, because being part of this is a wonderful adventure, and it's something that really is becoming very important to me. So I don't know if I would say, as a balance, after seeing all of these decks, I think that the majority of that I would have still bought them even without the YouTube channel. But there's some of them that I bought specifically because of some content that I was filming, and then I ended up really falling in love with them. So I am very grateful for that. I'm very interested to know if your buying habits when it comes to a Tarot and Oracle deck has changed throughout the years, especially with, you know, with YouTube, or not just YouTube, but also Instagram or TikTok, for example, or any other platform that you watch quite regularly. Because it is very interesting now that we have the access to all of these decks around the world, and there's so many that are being produced every single day. And so it will be interesting to repeat this video maybe 2 years from now to see where I'm at. In any case, thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.